Welcome everyone to another episode of our Global Employability Expert Series. So I'm very excited to be here today again with you. My name is Mirta Aguirre. I am the head of employability of Virtual Internships, and we bring you another episode with a very interesting speaker. So let's see a little bit, let's remind for those who have been already here how this webinar works. So basically we are recording this webinar. So if for those who couldn't join us, they can watch it later on, or if you have to leave a little bit earlier, then you don't miss the webinar. If you haven't watched other webinars, remember you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and then you will find our recordings. This webinar works, the speaker will give their presentation, and then we have a moment to ask some questions. We will ask these questions through the Q&A section. So you have it in your Zoom, please write it there. Questions that are in the chat probably will get lost. So make sure to submit your questions through the Q&A option below, okay? If you have any questions about your program, specific information you want to know, please reach out to your IEM. Okay, today we will ask questions to our very special guest. So perfect, we know how it works. So now let's explore the topic for today. So what we're going to do today is discover the 5 mindsets that can help you to uncover and capture opportunities and set you up for success. Okay, super interesting topic, and we have someone who can really tell us all about this. So let's discover who our speaker is. So Mahdi is the Vice President of Digital Transformation at Clipcom, a PA-backed venture helping leading global companies and fast growth startups to build, manage, and scale the next generation of world-changing companies. Mahdi Shariff is also the co-founder of the Humble AI, a startup who's democratizing data science and AI, enabling a code-free way for anyone to be able to extract data insight from data. Mahdi was awarded Forbes Asia's 30 Under 30 and was a Chief Strategy Officer at Suntech, a leading advertising technology startup. He's an advisor to Slash, the largest international startup and venture capital conference in China, and has been a speaker at numerous conferences, including Slash in Singapore and China, InnoFest in Singapore and China, London Business School, China Forum in London, and iDigital in China. Mahdi's prior experience was in investment banking in London, in the UK, focusing on mergers and acquisitions in the technology, media, and telecoms sector. He's a passionate advocate for social impact and the startup ecosystem, and is also an angel investor with a portfolio including Pathao, Didi of Bangladesh, Purple AI, New Retail Analytics, and sorry, can I see the last part? AI credit scoring for the unscored, sorry. Okay, so we have a really prepared speaker who knows a lot. And so let's cover what he will talk about today. So in this webinar, Mahdi, expert in digital transformation and Forbes Asia's 30 Under 30, will walk us through the key concept of mindset and will invite us to explore in depth the different mindsets we need to be successful in anything we set up for. So without further ado, welcome, Mahdi.
Perfect. So thanks everyone for the warm welcome, and really looking forward to speaking with you all. So today I wanted to kind of cover and share essentially a few different mindsets that I think will be really helpful, that I found helpful for myself, kind of on my own journey, but also that'll be very helpful hopefully for yourselves as you continue to enter the world of work and continue into your internships. So the 5 mindsets that I'll be covering will be, so starting off with the growth mindset, if we keep going, the entrepreneurial mindset, the data-driven mindset, the creative mindset, and also an impact mindset. And so what I want to do is share a little bit about each of these different mindsets and some examples of how it's been relevant for me in the past, and then how it'll be relevant for you as well. And then I'm looking forward to hearing your questions at the end. So I think we can probably kick off with the growth mindset. So the growth mindset is in contrast something called the fixed mindset. And the idea of a fixed mindset is saying often people think that their current intelligence, abilities are fixed, and you can't really change them. And that's in quite a big contrast to the idea about a growth mindset, which is much more around saying everything is basically learnable, and you can start to use failure as opportunities to learn, and you can basically stretch and build on your own different abilities as you go forward. And I'd really encourage you to start thinking about, when you're looking at yourself, saying, oh, but I'm really bad at maths, I can't do this. Thinking, actually, no, how can I learn these skills and basically put them into practice and learn a new capability? And I think especially for new people entering the world of work, it's a really, really important trait. So I just wanted to share a few areas where that's been relevant for me in my journey so far. So I think it was mentioned, I started life in the world of EY, and actually picking growth mindset was really, really important. I'd never really heard about the big four and the world of finance. I studied chemistry. And so coming into the world of investment banking meant I suddenly had to relearn a lot of different things, which I hadn't been exposed to in the past. And so I think the key thing here is taking kind of a growth mindset approach and just suddenly starting to work out, how do I learn a pathway or learn the pathway to pick up the skills I need? So whether it's starting to look at reading the right types of information, speaking to mentors in those areas, and then starting to navigate. Similarly, as you can probably tell from the accent, I'm from here in the UK, and I ended up basically moving from London to China. And actually I couldn't speak very much Chinese before I landed out there, just did a 2-week crash course. And so it was really a massive learning curve. A lot of people said, you can't do that. You can't really go and study abroad, work abroad. You don't know the language. And actually what you realize is that if you take a different approach and basically have a more entrepreneurial approach, which we'll touch on in a minute, you can kind of land out there and realize that actually a lot of this stuff is learnable. So you can go out there and land in something that's a completely different environment, complete different experience, and actually pick up the skills that you need. So I end up basically going to China, all the way from London, and joining a very early stage startup called Sunteng that ended up being one of the best experiences I've ever had, and would highly encourage the kind of opportunities that you'll find yourself being able to do if you take a growth mindset. So I just want to touch on a little bit around, what does this mean for you, and how can you start applying this in your experiences as well? So a couple of things to really kind of recap and remember. So one, everything is learnable. So if you find yourself thinking you don't know it and it's not your area, think again, because you can go pick it up and learn those skills. The internet is a great place to start, and there's so much information, whether through webinars like this, or whether there's through other YouTube videos or books or online learning courses. So start trying to find a way how you can learn the skills you need. The second thing about the growth mindset is really around feedback. So the growth mindset also means that having a very open dialogue with people around you, around what you can improve, is really a good opportunity for you to learn how you can improve very specifically. So when you're in your internships and going through the world of work, be really proactive about asking for feedback from your peers and from your bosses and other people you work with, because it's a really great way for you to then work out what's the specific areas you need to learn so that you can actually become a better employee, a better manager, a better boss in the future. And one final little additional point is there's a great book called Mindset by Carol Dweck that I would highly recommend reading. So if you get a chance, I would definitely take a look at that book. So that's the growth mindset. I wanted to touch on the entrepreneurial mindset. So an entrepreneurial mindset for me is really around the kind of willingness to take risks and think differently. But really, the risk isn't the reward. So when I first started looking into the world of China and quitting my old job in investment banking, which was quite comfortable, quitting my job for the sake of joining a startup wasn't the real reason about being entrepreneurial. But actually, it took a lot of hard work and a lot of commitment. So I spent 2 years basically going back and forth, and I'll share a little bit more about that story next. So because China was such a different beast, I really needed to work out, could I even be helpful? What does that really mean going out there as an English person not speaking the language? And so I had to try and do a lot of different ways of trying to learn and understand what's happening out there and understand what the opportunity was as well. So essentially, I was still actually working as a young grad, basically in EY at the time. And then during those years, I actually told my old boss I was on holiday and spent all of my holiday days going back and forth to China. And then I ended up doing 7 trips in 2 years, basically working with this startup that I found out there. We had 15 people we had squat hole toilets and many cockroaches running around the offices. So it was very basic versus life in London. But what was really amazing about it is that over those 7 trips and over those 2 years, I learned a huge amount about the company, about what was happening out there, and if I could be helpful. And basically that determination basically enabled me to then go out with confidence to de-risk the risk of quitting my job and joining a startup and being able to actually go through the journey with them. And that journey has been a journey from 15 people to over 150 people that we had in the company by the time I left. And was one of the most formative years formative few years of my life as I moved out there after 2016. And so there's a great Chinese proverb called "Determination tempers the sword of your character." And I thought it was helped capture basically what's needed to kind of really have the entrepreneurial mindset when you're going into the world of work. Perfect. So I think the relevance for each of you for where you are today is a couple of key messages, really. So one, I think, be proactive in pursuing your mission. So when I was first told, hey, I know you're interested in China, but you're sat in London, you can't do it. I think you've got to be really proactive around finding the right ways that you can drive that mission yourself and really pursuing that cause. So if there's something you're really passionate about, really do everything in your control that you can and invest in yourself to basically go and take that opportunity to learn. The second thing is around thinking outside the box on learning those new skills and not just relying on your employer. So at the time, I had wanted to actually really understand, okay, how do I get more exposure to the skills I needed? And so that meant that I actually started essentially kind of interning on the side with the startup to basically support them, which was a huge learning curve. But then also spending a lot of time doing a lot of self-learning through the books and through other content as well, to help make sure I build my skill sets for the skills needed for that role. And the third piece I wanted to highlight is often I speak to a lot of students and they ask around navigating working in large companies and small companies. And there's a lot of big benefits to both. But one thing on the entrepreneurial side around startups is sometimes you can get some different types of exposure and different types of responsibility early on. So if you like that kind of environment, it's a really great working environment for you to intern or work with. And then it's about saying, is it the right time? And how can you kind of capture basically the skills that you need that support you in pursuing your mission? So that's a few points on the entrepreneurial mindset. And I think we can move on to the next one. Perfect. So this next one I wanted to talk about really was around having a data-driven mindset. And I think the reason why this is very important, probably for all of you, is that we're working in a very digital world where we have tons of data, more than ever before. And so regardless of which industry you're in, actually data is going to become more and more relevant as a skill set, even in creative industries. And so I wanted to share a little bit about a framework for how to think about data, which is this little triangle. And so this triangle really is around data being this foundation and making sure you have good data. So there's an old saying that says garbage in and garbage out. And so making sure you've got good data and what that means is a really important skill to learn. So you can make sure that because you're making decisions off the back of data. The second thing on this pyramid is analysis. So analysis is often when you're then saying, actually, if I take all this data, how can I analyze and understand the trends and the patterns of what's happening inside of your data? And that tells you, that can give you lots of information. It helps you support your types of decisions. And these are areas where technology can also help you a lot. And I'll touch on that in a moment. The third layer is called insights. And this is really about the people-led area. So when you're thinking about your role, start thinking, okay, well, the insight is saying, based on this analysis that I've just done, what have I now learned that's new that I can take away? Because that should help guide you towards which are the different options and actions that you can take, which takes you to the strategy. And your strategy essentially is those set of actions that you're going to pursue based on that data. So if every time you're looking at analysis, which often happens in companies, and they go, oh, that's interesting, and then they carry on doing the same thing they've always done, then you're probably not using data properly. And so understanding how you do analysis, but importantly, get insights and then choose your strategies based on the data you get back is really important. And so as an example of a creative industry or a friend in the creative industries and where this is also relevant, not just in the world of finance, a good friend of mine was a jewelry designer, and she was working in Harrods at the time. And she actually wrote down all the different types of jewelry that were bought from people from different nations, whether they were Chinese or whether they were Russian or whether they were Arab, for example. And that basically helped her think through what different types of designs are most relevant for different types of audience for who she might want to sell to in the future. And that really helped her become a really successful jewelry designer. And so even though she was from the creative industry, she used data in a really intelligent way. So as an example of how that's been relevant, I've used it all throughout my life in the world of EY, in automating a lot of my analysis work that I did in the investment banking world, but also through our new venture, where we're looking at basically building tools to help people get more insight out of data, to help you quickly get an understanding of data quality, how you can analyze it. And it's a really good first pass for any grads who are starting to do analysis inside of their jobs as a quick way of trying to understand why something's happening. And that's been a really powerful skill inside of any types of transformation work that you do inside of organizations. So taking a data-driven mindset is really, really key. So in terms of what you can do from relevant for your own skill sets, I'd really say start with the basics. So learn Excel and get really good at Excel. It's the most basic tool to analyze data, but it's a really fundamental skill set that will give you a good basis to learn all sorts of types of analysis from it. And try and be curious about some of the new areas, like things like data science. So especially if you're interested in doing more advanced areas of data, there's lots of different things you can do in data science today, and it's a really powerful skill to learn. And I think I highlighted the second point really, which is around, regardless of which industry you're in, it's a fundamentally important area that will set you in a really good, that's a really good basis for any job that you'll be looking at doing. So I'd really look at how you can build those skills very quickly as you get into the world of work. And if you don't believe me about how much data there really is a ton of data absolutely everywhere. So all the platforms and technologies you use, because some fun things in there in Europe, like GDPR, you can download all of the data that Facebook or LinkedIn has ever collected on you. So if you're even curious to see how much data exists and how much data you might have access to, you can go download it yourself and go see and have a little play. So that might be a fun task for you to have a look at if you want to understand why data is important, because the biggest technology firms in the world, as well as every other industry, is using data. And one final thing that you might want to play with is you can try Humble AI and let me know your feedback if you're playing in the world of data. So I think that's enough on data. I think we can probably move to the next one. So data is definitely on the technical side, and then on the other side, there's creativity. And so I think kind of a creative mindset is really underrated today in terms of how powerful it is across every industry. So even if you're going into the world of finance or consulting or all these different areas, creativity is an incredibly important skill as well. And it's a very different part of the brain, but it's something that I would highly recommend, and I wish I had done earlier, is get into a creative mindset. And so when we say creativity, I think this kind of captures some different ways you can look at it. So whether it's transcending traditional ideas, rules, or patterns or relationships to create new meaningful ideas is a really interesting way. And it touches on the entrepreneurial side that I mentioned earlier about thinking differently and thinking outside the box. It's also around kind of creating new original ideas as well, which often takes inspiration from different industries. And so being curious is a big part of actually the basis for building a creative mindset. So I just wanted to share a couple of examples of where this has been quite relevant for us. one actually is actually an example from one of our interns who came and worked with us. And essentially, she was from a fashion background. She came to work with us in our data startup. And what was really interesting is her mindset of thinking about art and fashion and a very human viewpoint on data basically meant that she tried to completely change the user experience of how we designed our tool and how we designed our content in a very friendly way that actually really helped improve the user experience rather than talking about maths and statistics and data. She had a very different way about how she articulated the content, which resonated really well with our audience. And that was by her leveraging her kind of creative mindset. Additionally, actually, one of our other interns who came and joined us actually started playing with TikTok. And we had typically been using platforms like LinkedIn and more formal platforms and professional platforms to promote. And instead, she started thinking, well, actually, if we're looking at young people who are trying to learn data and don't know where to start, actually, TikTok will be an interesting platform. So she started creating some content on TikTok, and it was a really, really different levels of engagement, and it demonstrated a very different thought process that she went through that was really helpful for ourselves as a company. And that's where she leveraged her kind of her creative mindset for how she could leverage it in our firm. And so that's just a couple of examples of what that looks like for interns and how they've contributed to our journey using their own creative mindsets. And finally, storytelling. Storytelling is a really important piece in business as well as in a personal sense. So whether you're interviewing, whether you're pitching your business, or you're actually working in sales, storytelling is a key part of how you build that creative mindset and bring that into your professional setting. So those are a couple of examples that I wanted to share with you. And so the relevance, I think, probably for yourselves, I think about how you can use creativity to differentiate yourself and really exercise those creative muscles. Just like any other skill, it takes practice and takes time and commitment and effort. And so think about how you can bring that into your regular life to help make sure that you build that over time. The second thing is around leveraging that power of storytelling. So I'm sure when you've done interview preparation, they might tell you about things like the STAR technique, so situation, task, action, result. These are almost storytelling techniques to help you share how do you articulate your approach, what you did inside of that situation, the actions you took, and the result and the impact that you basically made. And by understanding creativity and thinking about storytelling, it can help you improve the way that you pitch yourselves for your next within your internship, or articulate the value you've brought to the company as well at the end of your internship as well. So really think about what that looks like. And I think finally, really think about the creative kind of mindset. It actually helps you both professionally and personally. And so for the creative mindset, my final quick piece of advice, there's another great book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And there's a link on the slide that you can start to kind of put that in practice as well. So last but not least, impact. So I think if I think back from when I first started the world of work, and everyone's very focused about the kind of hard skills, about some of the technical areas that we need to kind of go do, and also just some of the and also just the kind of wider motivation around obviously funding yourself and earning a good wage. They're all really key aspects of what the world of work means. But I think now more than ever, we also need to be thinking about the world of impact. And so when you're thinking, and this is the reason I put the kind of ikigai, which is a Japanese concept, which kind of touches on different aspects of how you can think about where's a great place for you to be spending time in your future. And this helps knit together kind of what you love, what you're really good at, and that skill sets that you've been building, what you can be paid for, so you can obviously fund your life and be paid for the work and value you create. But then finally, and really importantly, I think what the world needs. So at the center of all of this is kind of that magical place called Ikigai. And I think when you're thinking about the types of organizations that you join and the types of kind of roles and responsibilities and impact that you do in your job, I think this is a really great framework for thinking about how do you maximize also your social impact as well as the professional impact that you can have. And so I wanted to share a couple of examples of what that has looked like for me in my journey that might spark some ideas for yourselves. So I think the first one was around Link Community Development. This is actually a charity I was involved with when I was at university. So when I was a university student, I was running charity hitchhikes from London all the way to Prague, to Morocco, to Croatia, hitchhiking the entire journey, and essentially helped raise for about £25,000 in a year by gathering lots of different students to basically run these types of activities. And not only did it have a great positive impact to support education initiatives in sub-Saharan Africa, actually it taught me a whole load of great skills that helped set me up for success when I joined my first role and my first job in the investment banking areas. Second example is an organisation called Slush. It's actually a not-for-profit from Helsinki, which is actually a student-led conference, which has around 25,000 plus people every single year. And they have the biggest venture capital firms, to people like Al Gore, to Vinod Khosla, to Google Venture Partners, all sorts of great people come to join for this. But I think one of the great things it shows you actually is that the people at Slush, because it's all a lot of great young people with lots of energy, looking at what they can really do. They've built one of the most successful events across Europe in technology and venture capital, and they've also done it super sustainably. So, because it's not for profit, they basically put all of the money back into helping develop young students, all of the volunteers who are basically involved, as well as doing everything sustainably. So whether that's by reducing the amount of plastic, so there's no plastic on, they basically remove all plastic from all the vendors and people they work with. They support lots of vegan partners and things like this, as well as actually do lots of different investments in education to support young people. So that's another example of where we've helped support, which also given me some great opportunities to meet some brilliant people who also care about not just doing well, but doing good. And then finally, through our own venture, one of the key missions for us is about helping make AI and data more accessible to everyone, to help basically level the playing field and give everyone, to reduce the wealth gap of the future. And so I think as we go through this, that's always been a core guiding principle for how we want to operate, to make sure that we help have an impact on the wider world in a positive way. So when you're thinking about the organizations you work with, try and think about how you bring together these different points to make sure that you can kind of come to the best of, to the kind of perfect place of the kind of ikigai at the very center of all of this. There's some final thoughts in terms of for yourselves. Really think about your impact and the impact you're having and how you're helping nudge the world in a better way. Secondly, think about impact from your own health and your mental well-being. I think it's something that's super underrated, and I wish I'd really thought about kind of throughout earlier in my careers as well, around the type of work you're doing, how that supports your health and making sure you balance that, and also make sure that you're in a kind of great mental place and you're kind of aware of that and making sure that you're taking steps to protect that. It's really important in the world of work because sometimes there's a lot of pressure around what the world looks like, and so you've got to make sure that you kind of keep that in mind. And then finally, pay it forward. I think one of the kind of biggest kind of principles that I've tried to kind of carry on is kind of the idea of give first and pay it forward. So there's been an incredible bunch of mentors and individuals who have supported me throughout my careers, and I think it's been one of the reasons why I like supporting activities like this is just to basically pay it forward and share some of the lessons that I've learned with the next generation of people who are coming through. And so as you go through that process, just remember to pay that forward again to peers who are maybe a couple of years below you and support them in their journeys as well. And that's another great way where you can have an impact in a positive way to other individuals as well. So I think that hopefully summarizes the kind of 5 different mindsets that I thought would be helpful to cover. And then wanted just to highlight what's really the impact when you start to apply these mindsets in practice. So I thought I'd share a couple of mini highlights from that I've enjoyed through my journey in this. So when I think about the world of work, from initially starting doing things like knocking on doors and cold calling many years ago as some of my first jobs, to even working in a preschool and a nursery, to kind of where that's then taken me, it's been a very different journey, which has taken me everywhere from obviously London to Shanghai, where we obviously ran Slush, and that picture that you can see is just some of the volunteers that we pulled together to run this huge event in Shanghai. to being featured on the front page of a financial newspaper in China, which was a very bizarre experience, but a great one to kind of be involved with, to meeting some amazing people in the world of technology. So Tencent's one of the biggest internet companies in the world, and thank you for the the comment about the wonderful smile. To being lucky enough to basically, through my journey in the startup as we scaled up, to be featured on the kind of Forbes list for the 30 under 30, which has been a really fascinating journey as part of that, and then has allowed me to have some freedoms to be able to then angel invest and support a couple of other younger firms, and work with some really great entrepreneurs. But I think through all these different experiences, having the chance to kind of work and learn and then support basically different people across that journey has been really, really powerful. And I think these 5 different mindsets have played a big role in that. And so I'd highly encourage you to think about how you apply these different mindsets to your life and your internships as you go forward as well. So I think those are the main things that I wanted to cover for today. And I've started to see a few questions start to arise in the groups already. So I think we can jump into some questions.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you very much for that presentation. It was super powerful. I've been taking some notes because you shared very interesting ideas. So just to summarize before we go into our questions, so Mahdi basically told us 5 mindsets, right? You mentioned growth mindset, which is about believing we can try and improve and not stay in our comfort zone saying, no, I don't know about this, I'm not good enough. So growth mindset is about saying, okay, I can do it, I can learn, I can improve. Very important. Entrepreneurial mindset, that was the second one you shared, right? Having ourselves into projects, creating, connecting with people, having a solution for a problem, right? Then the third one, which I found personally the most interesting one, because it's the one I don't know much about, which is having a data-driven mindset, right? What we have a lot of data, what we do with that, super interesting. Fourth, creativity. And you mentioned storytelling. I want to go into this a little bit further. And then the 5 mindset, think about the impact, right? So all of these are super interesting. And if I have a question related to creativity, right? I have someone who asks me, okay, I found it hard to explain and learn how to be creative. For example, if I read a story on a creative approach on an idea, technically that idea is no longer creative since someone already thought about it. How could I know I had a creative idea?
Cool. So there's actually a book that I'd highly recommend reading, and the title almost gives it away. And it's called How to Steal Like an Artist.
How to Steal Like an Artist. Okay.
Yeah, another great book. And basically, I think when we think about creativity, I think often we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to think that everything has to be super original, never thought of before, and has never been done. But often creativity involves borrowing from lots of different ideas and starting to kind of rethink them or use them in a different way, which is a little bit different. So I think don't worry about trying to create something completely new and completely unique. Actually, by just pulling different things together, different ideas, and being curious, and then experimenting and testing and seeing what works, that's part of the journey of the kind of the creative journey. So that's kind of the first point. The second thing I think I'd probably mention as well is the book I mentioned, The Artist's Way, is a great way of starting to see how creativity can manifest in different ways. And they've got lots of different tools and processes and structures for how you can help realize how you can find creativity in everyone. So I'd really recommend that book, The Artist's Way. And there's a link in the slides for anyone that's looking for it afterwards.
Yeah, we're gonna share the recording afterwards, and also the slides. So you will find all the links that Mahdi put there. Remember, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then you will automatically see when new webinars are uploaded. So subscribe. We're going to send also the link on our PDF, and then so you can be always watching the latest webinar. I have another question relating to creativity. Someone asks, does creativity relate to digital design, such as a computer art and design?
Great. So great question. So I think creativity actually is much wider than that. It's also very applicable to digital design. So I think Darcy, for example, if you're interested in looking into digital design and user experience design, then creative thoughts and creative thinking can be a really important part of that, as well as the pure design skills as well. And so you can probably start kind of Googling and researching around the ideas of user experience design and design thinking and some of the service design concepts. And those would be very relevant for when you're looking at building digital products. And actually, in Cyclum, the organization I'm in, we have lots of product managers and user experience designers and user researchers working on these types of problems all the time. And actually, and so it's very relevant to, even if you're bridging the kind of art side and the computer science side, it's a really important area to be looking at.
Yeah, I think that regarding creativity is also important to put ourselves in this growth mindset and think that we can also improve our creativity, right? Sometimes we may think, oh, I'm not creative. And then we realize that, yeah, we have done many creative things, right? So I think that's also important. And if I have a really interesting question that I always love. What piece of advice would you give to your younger self, right? Right when you were in college and you didn't know, or perhaps you did, I don't know, what you wanted to do. What is that piece of advice? Or if you could, if you could give yourself a piece of advice, what would that be for your younger self?
So I think actually the piece of advice that I would give my younger self is something that I heard later on has been a super powerful kind of life motto now, kind of going forward after I was first told it, which essentially, you never know when you've had a good day. And I learned this from a guy called John McBain, who was a self-made billionaire, but a philanthropist, and he's giving away pretty much all his wealth to charity. And he basically spoke about different points in his life when things were really tough and felt like a really bad day. And he kind of shared these different points in his life where he had this experience and thought, oh, what a terrible day. And what it meant is that afterwards, he ended up taking a different path that ended up leading to a better outcome in the end. And so if you find yourself, so I saw some questions in the chat around if you're struggling to find a role or employment and it's feeling like a really tough day, try and remember that quote, because what you might find is that it will help you go, why is it that I didn't get that role? What are the skills I need to go learn? And it might take you on a pathway to then learn those skills, or look for a different path that will lead you down to a kind of better end outcome or a different journey. So I think definitely bearing that in mind, I think during those tougher days is a really important kind of message to make sure that you also keep a positive mindset as an additional mindset to kind of bear in mind as you kind of go through that, because it is hard and it is challenging, but that's why kind of that determination is a really important piece of just kind of keep on looking at improving. And if you focus on yourself and just get yourself improving more and more every day, everything else will kind of fall into place. So I think that's probably one of the bits of advice that I wish I'd had earlier in my life, and I was very lucky to have been given it still reasonably early in my journey.
Yeah, that reminds me of this famous quote of Steve Jobs, the one he said in his speech at Stanford, right? He said, we connect the dots looking forward, right? Like me looking backwards. Right now, I don't know where I am, but when I look backwards, I said, oh, actually, this and that at the moment seemed like it was a bad thing, or I didn't know where it fit into my plan. Now I see backwards and see it makes sense, right? But I can only connect the dots now. If I were in the past and there's someone in the future would come and tell me, maybe that I would say, oh, okay, I'm okay. I know it will work out. That is why I think it's very important to have this positive mindset. And also you mentioned mental health, right? Like taking care of also about our mental health. This is a topic that in the recent Olympics, we heard a lot, right? Having this conversation on sometimes we're too concentrated on, I want to be successful. And yeah, okay, but success also means that we can enjoy what we do, right? And in order to enjoy and be okay, we need some mental health. So I think that's a really good advice. And changing a little bit the subject, I have someone who asked, how can oneself become an expert in artificial intelligence, and what is the right timing to begin investing in bank investment? Interesting question. When should we start investing, and how do we become an expert in AI?
Perfect. So one of the things actually I'd love to share is that when you're thinking about some of the new areas of technology or the new industries that you start to see emerging, just remember that actually you have the ability to become an expert. It doesn't matter how young you are. So
or how old, right?
Or how old you are. Great. No, very, very well spotted. So as an example, when I was that young grad and I was looking at the Chinese advertising technology industry, it's a specific niche area. And just by spending more time than pretty much anyone else in looking at that area, you suddenly start to become an expert in ways that actually even your other peers, for example, or people above you, haven't spent as much time as you have. And so if you spend some really focused effort on these new areas, you can start to develop and become an expert far faster. And especially when you think about all the new changes and new platforms and things that are coming out, just remember, no one's an expert in those areas. Everyone is trying to learn, and everyone is starting from scratch. So when you think about things like, even if you look at some of the new platforms, whether things like TikTok, for example, and people and content creators or whatever it might be, actually people who are playing and testing the new platforms as they arrive suddenly become experts. And that's why you've got lots of young people who are now have huge content channels and basically built mini businesses very, very young. And actually you have the ability to become an expert in any new field. So that's kind of more broadly about the new fields. Addressing the question around AI. AI is a fascinating industry, and there is a huge opportunity for what AI can do and what data can do. And so I'd probably start with looking at the fundamentals. So start first understanding kind of data and data analysis, as kind of touched on earlier. And then I'd probably then start to look at things like data science and then slowly building those skill sets. And then you can start looking into things like other areas of machine learning and AI. And I think within, by looking at the number of courses, there's some really great courses that are online. You can get exposure to that. Or again, you can start trying to look at internships or organizations that basically are in those areas to give you that first bit of exposure and some experience working with those types of technologies. And that's probably what I would really recommend to do to get into the world of AI. One final thing on AI is I'd also make sure that you keep in mind the impact mindset and think about things like AI ethics. So one of the important things is that everyone sat in this room listening to this this webinar, you're building the companies of the future. And so if you take in an impact mindset and think about how does ethics come into play when you're designing your products or designing AI systems, it makes sure that actually we're building products and platforms and companies that are going to have a positive impact on the world. So whichever area of technology you're looking at, do bear in mind how ethics and impact can come to play within what you do, because I think we all want to live in a better world, and we all have a part to play in that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, today's world is, there are more young people than old people. So I am always very optimistic about the future of the world, because I think if we, well, I'm not that young anymore, but I'm going to include myself in the young group. If we start including new practices, new ways of thinking, being careful about what we do and how it impacts others, like having this ethic mindset, I think that's a really good start, right? Because we are creating a culture that those people who have had a time in the world, like they're getting older, they have a different mindset. That's a reality, right? And so I think it's good for young people like our audience who are watching, saying, hey, I can really make an impact. And also something regarding what you mentioned about how we become an expert by, involving ourselves and learning. I think that's especially relevant today when the future jobs are, we don't even have an idea what they are yet, right? When I went to university, community management, that it didn't exist. So it was not that I had an option to say, oh, maybe I want to, be in charge of social media. And there are so many jobs that will come, and we will definitely need to learn and become an expert because, that's something new. So I think that's a really nice point to have in mind. And we have another question. Someone said, how can I use data-driven mindset when taking a different career path?
Perfect. Are we able to hear just a bit, just to understand a little bit more about what did you mean by when you're taking different career path? So I think in all these industries, data-driven mindsets are really important. But are you asking a question around how to identify
Maybe,
career path?
Asma, you made the question. Would you like to clarify a little bit? Are you thinking perhaps how a data-driven mindset can help us explore different career paths? Are you there to clarify a little bit this question? Yeah, I'm thinking that more a little bit in that sense, like perhaps how it can be helpful for me if I'm exploring different career path, how a data-driven mindset can help me.
So as an example, one of the things I've done is in the past, I've gone on things like LinkedIn, and I've looked at LinkedIn data around which types of roles are basically people hiring in a certain area. And you'll start to see, especially in technology, you'll start to see lots of people hiring product managers, data analysts, data product managers, business analysts, and you'll see there's a huge number of new jobs happening in these technical areas, especially for digital. And so if you go look at how many new job posts are going in these different areas, you might be able to find areas that are growing really quickly that might give you the highest chance of basically finding future roles, for example. So that's one way that you could use data to try and find what that looks like basically for you. The other thing that you can do is, again, use data in a different way. So I play around with lots of automation tools. So in the past, I've looked at a company that you might want to go join, and I've actually pulled all the data on who's in there, who the employees, and what their backgrounds. And that way, then you can try and work out actually what kind of skills do I need to go build to be able to get a role in that type of organization? And also, who are the people that have something similar to me that I can go reach out to and ask for some advice? So I know a couple of obviously the questions around best bits of advice for graduates who are struggling with this journey. I often used to reach out, especially when I first started, and I still do today, reach out to people proactively and start a conversation, say, hey, look, take a really personal approach and just go, I really love whatever that you're working on. I'm really interested to speak to you because of these reasons. Please, do you mind having a short chat with me and see how, like, and just share some of your experiences. And normally what you'll find is if you're really proactive about it, actually people are incredibly responsive and you can jump on a call with them and learn from them. And you never know where it might take you. So in fact, actually, that's how our last two, we've had interns basically reach out to us directly, and then we got on really well, and we've ended up bringing them in on board, as well as us using platforms like virtual internships as well to find new interns as well. So I think just being really proactive is a really, really important piece. And so feel free to reach out to people on LinkedIn. I'll share my details as well. And I think just getting that into your mindset as well is a really, really key piece to be able to help go through that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn is a super powerful tool. Actually, I found this job thanks to LinkedIn. I saw the job offer there. And what you said, that is super important. Like we can do a search in LinkedIn and find, like you mentioned, the type and the name of the job we would like to have and see who is currently in that company. So we can go and see the profile of the person, and then we can see, okay, what did this person study? Okay, the person has these certifications. Maybe they did a course on Coursera that maybe I can do it. And then we can also, like Mahdi said, we can have this informational interview, right? That's the technical name of the situation where we send a message to someone and then we connect and we basically ask about the person's path, what they did. It's not a job interview. We're not going to ask for a job, but we're going to discover the other person. And like Mahdi said, it's quite surprising how many people are willing to talk about them, right? And say, hey, because if we find someone who has an interesting path, probably we're going to say, hey, that's very inspiring. I'd love to hear more. And oftentimes people reply in positively. So that's a great piece of advice. And if you don't have your LinkedIn updated, go and do it because it's super important. And
Yeah.
so I have an interesting question. Someone says, when I want to apply for a job, I get scared because I don't have enough experience. How can I be more confident?
Perfect. This is a really great question, and I'm not sure who asked the question because it's anonymous, but I'm going to share a quick viewpoint, and especially for our female graduates who are our future female leaders sat in the room. So especially for the female grads and students, one of the key things I've seen often in the world of work is that my female counterparts often look at a job description, especially, and they go, actually, I've only got
I read that article. Yes.
They go, I've got 5 out of 6 things, so I shouldn't apply for this job. And they rule themselves out. Often job descriptions actually aren't actually very accurate, for one. And two, it's not your job to filter yourself. So it's actually the employer and the interviewer who's there to try and assess your skills and your fit for the role. And so you should go in with that mindset that actually that's part of their role. And you've got to put your best self forward and filter what's relevant for you in terms of what you want to be doing. But actually if you're equipped for the role, that's the job of the interviewer to try and assess you. And so you should not be qualifying yourself out before actually going into the interview. And that's a big thing that especially my female counterparts I've seen in the past, but it's also very relevant for also everyone in terms of what that looks like. So remember, you can't win a race that you don't participate in. So make sure that you basically kind of put yourselves out there, take the risk, but also use it as a learning opportunity. So regardless of the outcome, just use it as an opportunity to work out actually what could I do better? How could I improve? Sometimes you might want to record your interviews so you can listen back to them and then work out how you could answer them better in the future, and then go from there. So that's one thing that I would always try and help suggest. So really don't rule yourself out from those.
Yeah.
Perfect. There's actually one question I wanted to make sure I did answer actually in here, which was I think from Shahad, saying, what's some of your tips on how to finish a book? Now, it's actually a really great question because I know I've recommended a number of books through this.
But then we have to read them, right?
You do have to read them. And I think one part is it takes time and takes commitment. So work out how you find time and create time in your day and your routines to be able to read. So whether that's in your commute or whether you wake up half an hour earlier and start kind of reading, or making sure you dedicate some time for reading is a really, really key thing, and building that into your kind of schedule. The second thing is, if you find yourself wanting to understand what you want to read, there's a couple of little companies like Blinkist and things like this that help do summaries of books. And then you could read the summaries and then work out whether you want to read the full book. And that might be a quick way to give you a taster of what's there. And then basically you can kind of follow up and read. The other third thing, which I do a lot of, is audiobooks. I took a little bit of time to get used to it, first reading audiobooks, but I can now read on kind of 2.5 or 3 times speed on audiobooks. And so what it means is that suddenly you can read a large number of books within a week or a month, just by getting into audiobooks. And so what I tend to do is start on audiobooks normally on 1 times, and then slowly increase it by 0.5 or by 0.x%, whatever it might be. And you can do this on your podcast and on Audible. And it's a really, really great way of then be able to finish lots of books and learn from them. So those would probably be my tips on how to finish a book.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. I love learning new things, but I'm not that, when I have a book, I procrastinate a little bit. So I discovered that audiobooks are great. Same way for podcasts, right? We can have great, perhaps we like more listening than reading. Okay, guys, so we're getting to the end of our webinar. We've had so many good questions. Mahdi, one last question, okay? So what piece of advice could you share with our interns, okay? They're interning in different companies. Many have their first job experience. Do you have one piece of advice so our audience can, reflect on it?
Sure. So I think, so I'm probably going to reflect back actually what one of the partners at UI first told me on my day one when I first started my internship, which was, you're not an intern, you're part of the team. And so, and basically that helped reframe everything that I did. So if you stop thinking about yourself just as an intern and just work actually, you know the objective of the organization and you know that you're there to help, it will help open up lots of different types of opportunities for what you can do. And one of the things that she also encouraged me to do, one of the best mentors I've had and still have actually till over a decade later, I still speak to her, is making sure that you then go really proactively, again, reach out, speak to people across the businesses, speak and learn about these different areas, just so you can make an educated decision. So from my side, I guess I'm happy you can easily find me online on LinkedIn or on Twitter. But feel free to drop me a note if you, for any questions, there's a couple of questions that we didn't get a chance to answer. I'm happy to respond back to you. So just drop me a line on LinkedIn and then we can go from there. But thank you for spending your evening with me or your mornings, depending on where you are in the world. And yeah, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Mahdi, for being here today. This has been very inspiring. I need to do some research on data-driven mindset. That is going to be my homework because you said so many interesting things. So for our audience, remember, if you have any question, you can reach out to our email, hello@virtualinternships.com. We're going to send this presentation where you can find also some past webinars. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And thanks for joining today and see you soon. Thank you so much, Mahdi, for being here today. It was a great pleasure.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me.
Bye. Everyone.